Chalo Dilli, onwards to Delhi. That was their battle cry. More than that, it was an expression of pain for a long sought-after dream. A dream of freedom for India. Give me blood, and I'll give you freedom, he had said. And from Singapore, on that overcast July day in 1943, the Azad Hind Fauj would begin its march to Delhi. They would reach Imphal, and for the first time the Indian flag would flutter proudly in the Indian sky. Yet the moment of triumph would be fleeting. In the jungles of Burma, the forgotten army would make one last stand, and their dream was to shatter in the pain of defeat. More than half a century later, some of them returned. The Azad Hind expedition would retrace that historic march. This is the story of those who returned. By early January of 1944, the INA had established its supreme headquarters in Rangoon, and by the end of the month, a full-scale attack was launched on two fronts, the Arakan and Imphal. While INA troops sped towards Imphal, Netaji established his advance headquarters at Memyo, a small town in the hills east of Mandalay. With their advance headquarters now at Memyo, the city of Mandalay became a transit center for the INA's troops. Mandalay, not Rangoon, is where Burma's past and present truly converge. It is the historic city from where Burmese kings rule the whole country, and even now it reflects the cultural heartbeat of the Burmese people. Netaji's first contact with Mandalay was during the 3 years he spent in jail there between 1924 and 1927 as a prisoner of the British. Years later, he would write, "Till then, Mandalay was but a name to us. I had a hazy idea that it was the capital of the last independent kingdom of Burma. But I remember distinctly that it was the place where Lokmanya Tilak had been imprisoned for nearly 6 years, and later on, Lala Lajpat Rai for about a year. It gave us, therefore, some consolation and pride to feel that we were following in their footsteps." As we drove to the prison inside the fort, outlined against the morning sky, we saw beautiful structures, which we were told were the palace and state buildings of the old kingdom. The memory of the good old days that were no more produced a pang in our hearts, and we began to wonder when Burma would once more be able to fly her flag of independence. Nature's beauty and the tragic relics of Burma's history intertwine here in Mandalay. On the 20th of March 1945, this fort was bombed so heavily by the British that the interior of the fabled Golden City was reduced to rubble and ashes. What remained was a broken shell, some walls, and a moat. Today, a replica of the once magnificent palace is all there is to remind one of Burma's past glories. Captain Lakshmi returns to this palace half a century after she first discovered it. And as she walks through the palace, she relives her days here with the women of the Rani Jhansi regiment who were on their way to Memyo. As the sound of her footsteps resound in these empty spaces, she can, even now, hear the laughter of her comrades and see the shine in their eyes, so certain were they of victory then. But through the laughter, she can also hear the cries and groans of the wounded as they were brought here from the Imphal front.
In Mandalay, we were more or less confined to this fort area because going out was dangerous. The place was bristling with spies, and they had been sending messages because every time Netaji came, there was very heavy bombardment. Netaji's headquarters had been moved to Memyo because that was a very safe place, and Mandalay was so exposed. But he also expected only to stay in Memyo for a few weeks and then move on further towards the front.
For months, this beautiful town on the edge of the Shan Plateau was to be the hub of the INA. Within a week of Bose's arrival in Memyo, Captain Lakshmi brought up a contingent of the Rani Jhansi regiment.
During the Imphal campaign, Memyo was very important to us because it was here that Netaji established his advanced headquarters. And various units of the INA were also based here. The Azad Hind Dal was also the advanced party because they were to be the civilian forces once we occupied various parts of India. They were also here, and I brought up one unit of the Rani of Jhansi regiment also to Memyo, and we started training here and preparing ourselves for advance. Memyo had traditionally a strong Indian population, and due to the war, most of the Burmese had fled the town and gone to various villages because they were afraid of being taken away by the Japanese to do labor, and later they were fear of air raids. But the Indians stayed on here, and they were most helpful to us in every way.
Returning to Memyo 50 years later, Captain Lakshmi didn't expect to find any of her colleagues. But a visit to a familiar house revealed Dr. Montu Banerjee.
हम लोग बहुत दिनों के बाद इधर बोलिए ने 3,500 फुट ऊपर चोटियों पर मुलाकात हो रहा है और आपको हम ले चलेंगे जो आपका प्यारा जगह था, यानी आपको दिन बचपन का दिन याद आ जाएगा आप लोग किस तरह INA में कटाते थे.
Montu Banerjee was the main supplier of medicines to the INA and had become a close associate of Netaji's during the leader's stay in Memyo. His sister Parul was in the Rani Jhansi regiment commanded by Captain Lakshmi. Today he guides her to the place where the regimental camp had been built all those years ago.
मेजर करूँ या कैप्टन करूँ या कर्नल मालूम नहीं कुछ भी बोलूँ आपसे लेकिन उन दिनों भी एक देखिए ना एक जैसा ड्रीम जैसा यानी सपना था.
I am very happy we have found this place because this building is exactly as it was when we had the Rani of Jhansi regiment camp here. But only this overgrown place that you see here was all nicely leveled as a field, and we used to have our flag post here in the middle.
Dr. Banerjee, now 84, leads a solitary existence here in Memyo, and all he lives on are his memories.
I possess nothing now, but still old people, when we meet each other, we remember those old days.
You remember when I brought the one platoon of Rani of Jhansi regiment girls and we came to your village? We went back very late. We got back to our camp after midnight.
After midnight. Yeah. So Major Lakshmi came to our camp, you know. It was late at night. That time that road was full with tigers and bears and even leopards. So we told them, don't take the risk. They said, no, we are after all soldiers. We got to go to the Kohima front. We'll advance with these few girls that are with me, we'll go to the front. I'm not afraid, not they are. And they said, yes, we are not afraid, we will go. And they started singing that national anthem, Subha Sukha Chayane Ki Barkha Barsi, Bharata Bhagya Hai Jaga. They started singing that and going, and hum Dilli Dilli jayenge, hum bigdi Hind banayenge.
Now you play that on your mouth organ.
Yes.
I remember you playing the mouth organ those days.
Yes.
At every function you had to play.
Yes. अच्छा भाई, मैं उस नेशनल एंथम में आपको यानी कौमी तराना सूर पर जो नेताजी बहुत पसंद करता था, हमको हमेशा बोला करते थे, ये गाना आप हमेशा बजाया करो। इसीलिए मैं आपको वही तराना फिर माउथ, लेकिन बाजा जो है वो जापानी और जर्मन बाजा ले, ये चीना बाजा बजाने जाओ तो चीना सुर निकलता, फिर भी मैं आपको चीना सुर में बाजा सुना दूँगा, कौमी तराना। ठीक है।
Something more about the song.
That other song you used to sing, हम दिल्ली दिल्ली जाएंगे, हम फिल्म बनाएंगे।
भूल गया सब। दिल्ली दिल्ली जाएंगे, हम बिगड़ी।
हम दिल्ली दिल्ली जाएंगे, हम फिल्म बनाएंगे।
सुभाष का कहना है कि हम दिल्ली जल कर रहना है।
सुभाष का कहना है, दिल्ली जाकर
भूल गया।
दिल्ली दिल्ली जाएंगे, हम अपनी हिंद बनाएंगे, हम दिल्ली दिल्ली जाएंगे, हम अपनी हिंद बनाएंगे, फौज बन के रहना है, दुख तक मुसीबत सहना।
The words may be a bit rusty and parts of the refrain forgotten, but his spirit is undiminished, as strong as before. For Captain Lakshmi, coming to Memyo has been a journey of remembrance. Netaji's house stands exactly as it did during those war days. This house was privy to every fluctuation in the INA's fortunes. It was here that objectives were discussed, strategies devised, orders given, and orders taken. Here, Netaji and the INA leadership swung between euphoria and despair as news of military victories and reverses trickled in. Captain Lakshmi was a frequent visitor to this house, often participating in discussions or receiving dignitaries. Today, only the walls remain, but they aren't silent. In her mind's eye, everything begins to come alive.
our INA troops were advancing towards Imphal, and Netaji was preparing to follow them as soon as news of the fall of Imphal to our forces was heard, and that we were now on the road to Delhi.
दम बढ़ाए जा खुशी के गीत गाए जा ये जिंदगी है कौम की जो कौम पे लुटाए जा दम बढ़ाए जा खुशी के गीत गाए जा ये जिंदगी है कौम की जो कौम पे लुटाए जा
The Japanese and the INA had begun their offensive on the Imphal front in March of 1944. And on the 18th of that month, the INA had crossed the border. At last, they stood on Indian soil. In less than a month after that, Kohima had been surrounded. And on the 14th of April 1944, Sardar-e-Jung Colonel Shaukat Ali Malik hoisted the Indian flag at Moirang in Manipur. For the first time, the Indian flag could flutter proudly on its own territory. The Battle of Imphal continued into May and saw some of the fiercest fighting of the entire war. The INA attempted to reinforce its position and tighten the noose around Imphal, but time was running out for the INA. The Burmese monsoon, with its awesome destructive force, was fast approaching.
When Netaji came up here from Rangoon, he was full of hope because the INA was advancing towards Imphal, and it seemed as if they would be in Imphal soon. But unfortunately, the news that finally came was not favorable to us. The monsoon had set in early, the roads had all become slushy, and our whole army was bogged down. Added to that, we had no air cover at all.
The British put their superiority in the air to great advantage. More than 300 flights a day were made and supplies were dropped to those under siege in Imphal. Surrounded on all sides and cut off from the rest of India, the Allied troops were nevertheless able to hold out. On the 1st of June, the monsoon broke over Burma in fierce torrents. Soon, the INA's lines of supply were no more than rivers of mud. It was plain that the thrust through Imphal couldn't be continued. The siege was lifted on the 27th of June 1944. The Allies began their counter-offensive, aggressively emphasizing their superiority in numbers, weapons, and supplies. The INA was now on the defensive. They were forced to retreat across the Chindwin River and into the mountains. Supplies had run out, and there was no transport. The INA lost 400 in battle, and another 1,500 to disease and starvation. No more than 2,600 survived the siege, and of these, 2,000 were in urgent need of medical care. The Allied advance seemed unstoppable.
The last time I came here was when Netaji invited me to dinner, and I found that General Shahnawaz had just come up from the front. General Shahnawaz gave Netaji a detailed picture of the front and the condition of our troops. And it was suggested that the Mount Popa, Bagan area should be held across the Irrawaddy to prevent the British moving forward as rapidly as they were towards Yangon.
So rapid was the Allied advance into Burma that Maymyo had to be abandoned. Captain Lakshmi, with a few others, retreated to the remote Inle Lake in the Shan Hills. The lake seemed a safe haven. The shadow of hostilities had not yet fallen on its placid surface. It would only be a matter of lying low until transport to Rangoon could be arranged. A Shan chief gave Captain Sehgal and her soldiers shelter in one of these homes built on stilts. But the British were not to be thwarted. They had been on her tracks from October of 1943, when she became a minister in Netaji's government. And here, they finally pinned her down.
Inle Lake, which is surrounded by the Shan Hills, seemed to be as peaceful as it is today. But unfortunately, we were spotted here too by British reconnaissance planes. The enemy seems to have followed us in the air because soon after we came, one morning I was going to the market, and as I was crossing a field, a lone enemy fighter came and swooped down so low that though I lay down on the ground, I could feel the heat of the propeller, and my shirt was also lifted up. And they machine gunned a few peasants who were working in the fields.
Captain Lakshmi fled from the comfort of the Inle Lake up into the dense recesses of the Shan Hills. But she was to have no respite, for the enemy tracked her down there as well.
But there we were captured by Karen guerrillas operating under the Force 136 of the British Army. We marched through the forest for about 3 days and 3 nights, nearly 100 miles, until we finally reached Taungu. And it was there that I was handed over to the British military authorities as a prisoner and taken to Yangon.
On the 1st of July 1945, Captain Lakshmi became a prisoner of the British. The march of the Rani Jhansi regiment was halted forever.